Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Off the Podium. I have Jovino Santos Neto with me. Welcome to the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. I'm honored by your invitation. Looking forward to chatting with you.
One thing that I realized in reading about you is that the biology background. Tell me about the biology and how that turned into music. I mean, I'm sure music was always part of it, but a little bit about the biology specifically.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, music is always part of it since I was a kid. I remember enjoying music in many different ways, of radio, records, tape recorders, all kinds of things were always, and playing, which I started when I was like 12. But I always liked also science in general, just reading about nature and the world. So it was something, first I thought it was going to be some kind of an abstract scientist studying like physics or engineering or whatever, something like more. And then when I was about, 14, 15, then I started to go more into nature. And I really enjoyed that too. It was something that was really pleasing to me. So when I was like 18, getting close to 18 years old, time to go to college, there was an option to either go into medicine, which was something that even though I appreciated, but it never saw myself as a doctor. But biology was something that felt good and I don't know, it's weird when you make those decisions. But it felt good and I went and I had a really good grade going into the Federal University in Brazil. I studied for a year and a half there, and then through a friend of mine whose brother was studying in Montreal at McGill University, biology too, but it was more of an agricultural school, part of McGill, but it was McDonald College, which was more about, forestry and fisheries and wildlife. So it was kind of like a crazy decision, but I said, let's go. And it was weird because I happened to have some instruments that I had bought, and I was able to pay for my schooling by selling the instruments. So I came to Canada in 1974, and I got a degree. But in the process, I also got to meet a lot of really cool musicians, and I was in a band, and we played, and all original music. We rehearsed a lot. So that was a really good. It was working on both ends. I was learning more about biology and learning more about music at the same time. So when I went back to Brazil in 1977, the goal was to continue my biological studies. I enjoyed playing with the band, but I didn't like the scene, the music scene, where you had to spend all the time in bars playing, very smoky places, and 90% of the people weren't even there listening to the music. I felt not very well respected, not by the musicians, but by the scene, the atmosphere, the environment. It was the exact opposite of what I wanted, to be close to nature. So I said, I'm just going to continue with biology. So I went back to Brazil to go for the master's degree at the Research Institute of the Amazon in Manaus. And that was the goal. I came to Rio to do my master's. And right around like a week or two after I arrived in Rio, I met Hermeto Pascoal. And just like point blank, he invited me to join his band. And I go like, wow. And I told him I don't think I can because, there's a whole schooling thing. And I really want to go continue my studies. He said, that's okay. You just play a couple gigs and then you can go. He kind of left the decision with me. And after I played a couple gigs, I couldn't leave. He was so, there was such a big challenge there. So I made the crazy decision to study, to become a musician, a professional musician, at the age of 23, and that's what happened. But so that was, in a way, it was fun. It was a way to develop. And then I spent 15 years with this band, and that was the real music school, was because we rehearsed 5 days a week, 6 hours a day at least, sometimes more. We toured a lot, made a lot of records, and that enabled me to work with orchestras, big bands, and the group we had, which was a very tight ensemble, rehearses so much, and touring and learning about composition, improvisation, arrangement. So that was my real post-grad work, was working with Hermeto. But the biology thing never left. I mean, and because working with Hermeto was like the most ecological of all musicians because all his inspiration comes from nature, working with animals, animal sounds, and he grew up in a place that was completely rural. So he has that connection. So in a way, what you think is going to be like the fork on the road, actually it's not. It's just a widening of the road. So when you think, oh, am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? And you have to think a lot to make a decision. But in the end, there's no fork. There's not even a road. There's just a horizon.
Wow.
So I'm very happy to be able to incorporate those things into my musical activities. I teach from the basis of a very biological outlook and concepts. And that's pretty much how it's been running for me.
Wow, that's amazing. For those who don't know Hermeto Pascoal, who your teacher, your mentor, your friend, a little bit about him and what he means, not only to Brazilian music, but also to the world music in general. A little bit about him.
It's these days everybody is called a genius. I mean, there's genius awards and there's genius this and genius that, and you see a 12-year-old playing and say, "Oh, that's a genius," which is true. I mean, but if there's one person today that I would say qualifies as being a genius is Hermeto Pascoal because he's a totally self-taught musician. He's legally blind because his eyesights are so poor being albino. He can see he can never read a book. He could never read a book in his life. But as I'm showing it to you, Hermeto writes that.
Wow.
You know, or he writes. I'm right now in the process of working on the score he made in 1971. So he can write by putting the paper to his nose and putting little dots on the paper. And besides being the most amazing pianist I know, the most amazing flute player I know, the most amazing composer I know, because he has absolutely no. People say, "Oh, he's a great, classical composer, a jazz composer, a jazz musician." Hermeto is none of those things. He's all of those things and much more.
Wow.
Because so I mean, I spent enough time working with him to understand that he's a human being. He's not a god of any kind, without all the things that human beings have, But at the same time, he has devoted his entire life to making music. And he's not done yet. So he continues to compose, he continues to play, he continues to grow. He's going to be 85 years old next year and continues to be completely, aware and conscious of the music he does. And he also aware of the fact, like you said, that not many people know his work. He's not the kind of musician that you would see in the cover of a jazz magazine, the cover of a music magazine, or even by having sold lots of records, because his records are all available on YouTube. You can get all of them for free. And he's giving his music away, to the world in many different ways. So it's the kind of thing that it's so big that we won't know his stature until maybe 50 years from now or more, because it takes a while for that mountain to be seen. You're very close to the mountain, you have no idea how big the mountain is. So Hermeto is also aware of that. And my work, in a way, besides being a composer, performer, educator myself, is also to work with Hermeto's music into making sure that his music, his legacy, is left for the generations to follow. So I spend a lot of time, like I've showed you, right now working on these things, putting them into finale, cleaning up, because Hermeto's notation style is very unique. He writes, he doesn't use, never having gone, he dropped out of school in the 4th grade. And elementary school.
Wow.
So since then, but he learned everything. He writes full orchestra scores. Everything is transposed. All the instrumentation, like, and he writes the perfect transposition. And it's very rare to find like a mistake in his writing. He takes so much care. And back in the days, like I'm working on a score from the early 70s. He was still using key signatures. And he's like, he's precise. And this chart that I'm working on has 4 flutes, 5 saxophones, oboe, tuba, bass, piano, guitar, and drums. And it's a beautiful waltz. And I had no idea. I actually know this piece, but I started with the introduction, with such a strange introduction. And then as I go, like on page 3, I know this tune. It's a waltz, But how he took this piece and arranged it for this. And it's not even finished. At one point, he stopped it and just continued just with the piano part. So it's one of those unfinished pieces that will again be left, and maybe he'll finish too, but who knows? You know, he's doing so many other things.
And there's, like you said, there's so much online on YouTube. It was a while ago, but I did come across a video of him talking about his little boxing match with Miles Davis. And how he punched Miles Davis because Miles Davis didn't know which direction to look at, and he was Hermeto was talking. You talked about his eyes and his eyesight, and in that video he also talks about how it was bad at a young age. Yep. And he was, you know, his eyesight and all of that contributed to him punching Miles Davis. So,
if you look at him, you never know which way he's looking, because one eye is completely in, it's cross-eyed. That's part of the albinism, the gene for being an albino, is that the optical nerve gets braided, gets twisted. So he has one eye that's totally in, and the other one is like those laser scanners at the grocery store. It's like, so he's actually seeing inside and seeing outside, like very big. It's interesting. His eyesight was never good, but like all of us who get old, our eyesight gets, you know, weaker, have to use glasses. He has exactly the same eyesight from when he was born. It never gets worse.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It doesn't get better. I once took him to a eye doctor in Austria. We had a day off somewhere in Austria, and I took him to an eye doctor, and the eye doctor spent like a couple of hours examining him, you know, with all the machines and everything. And then he calls me outside and says, does this gentleman, does he walk outside? Can he go out? He says, are you talking about, I mean, he's totally functional. He walks and he, you know, crosses streets and took buses when he was young, you know. He never drove a car, that's for sure. Oh, but yeah, he's functional. He can see actually a lot. He can his what do you call his ability to physiognomy. Like he can really recognize people. People hasn't seen many years. He or he thought, hey, the person looks just like that other guy. So he is actually can see very well. It's just that he sees in his own way. Another unique characteristic of such a unique personality.
Wow. Well, you did mention that I had a previous guest on, and we talked about how sometimes with certain composers, with certain artists, it doesn't matter what genre, you know, years later, you know, people come back to it. They're like, wow, this is such amazing work. And unfortunately, we didn't accept it and appreciate it as much as we should have. So hopefully his music does that. But it's great that there's someone of your prominence and importance in the world of music that is also already appreciating what he's done. And you're putting in so many hours and you know, helping him with his legacy. And so hopefully future generations will appreciate what he's done as much as you have. And others, of course, there's many people that appreciate what he's doing. A little bit about your compositions. We talked so much about your mentor, your teacher, your friend, a little bit about what you do and your compositions. And I don't want to assign a genre to you because you're working in so many different areas, from orchestral music to, you know, jazz, as we call it, and other things. A little bit about what you do.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that we learned by working with Hermeto, is that all the things that usually people, all the distinctions, the borders, the bends, the drawers where people have to, and I'm not against people classifying music. There's, you know, the musicologists and the people who sell records and the people who, they need to put like styles and which is okay, that's totally fine. But at the same time, from the point of view of the creator of music, the person who creates music, when I'm playing, the output of what comes out when I play, whether composing, improvising, you know, performing, it absolutely, that's not a consideration. We don't think about, oh, this is a jazz piece, or this is a folkloric piece, or this is a, you know, we can think about styles of rhythms, of grooves that we learn through the course of our lives, to learn the definitions of the fantastic colors of music, especially rhythmic colors that come from all over the world. And I'm fascinated by that. I love studying the music from West Africa, South Africa, North Africa, Indian music, Chinese, you know, from all the different colors and flavors of music. This is something that for me, it's like going to restaurants and enjoying the food from all different cultures. I was not born in China, but I love Szechuan. So, I mean, I love the music that's made in different parts of China, or North Indian, South Indian, you know. So I think that the training of having performed and worked and studied under Hermeto for all these years, in a way prepared me and the other members of the group that stayed with him for so long to basically drop into any kind of musical situation, any kind of musical environment, and at least find your bearings, find your orientation. This way is up, here's the clave, here's the basic backbone, this is the harmonic structure, this is the melodic thing, and you can do something. Maybe just clap your hands, or maybe pick up a melodic instrument, or play along, but at least it enables you to appreciate and to share music from so many different cultures. And that has led me to also like write music for gamelan, or go. I did a tour of India. I did 2 tours of India with all musicians. I was the only non-Indian in tour in India with playing piano, which is like crazy. Which is like, what are you thinking? But it's still, I learned so much, and I continue to learn. It's mostly about Carnatic music, South Indian music, through friends and people that I've met. I've played musicians from Mali, from China, a lot from the Afro-Caribbean, diaspora from Cuba, Puerto Rico. I have many good friends. And I don't pretend to be a specialist, to say, oh, no, I know everything about the music from Cuba. No, every day, every year, I learn like another 3 or 4 styles of music from Cuba that I had no idea existed. So I would not pretend that I have gotten to the end of that book yet. I'm still, every time a little bit more, I learn more, because friends of mine who really know a lot more than I do, and I just listen to them like a student. So I think that the idea is really to learn how to learn, to be a student. So you continue learning, you don't close that door. At one point, say, oh, you're a professor, you are this. Yeah, that always signifies something like you're at the end of the line. Oh, there's like nec plus ultra, there's nothing beyond this. But actually, there is so much. Music is really infinite, and that's one thing Hermeto showed us. Musical is a universe of music, and that therefore we can travel, we can find, and there's nothing wrong with anybody who decides to stay in one station. Like, okay, my life, I'm going to be a classical pianist, or I'm going to be a folk, a bluegrass mandolin player, I mean, whatever. All those things are totally cool, and I love it to express. But my own path is more the path of the generalist, who tries to know more and more about more and more things, rather than the specialist who knows more and more about less and less. A professor once told me the specialist is the guy that at the end of his life he knows everything about nothing, because he got so focused on one little thing. And that's one thing that moved me away from science, because science, you have to really become a specialist and find your area of specialization. It could be only about the birds that have a certain color, or maybe only about the male birds of that species, only during about the springtime. So you start to narrow your focus of study, and there's a lot to study when you narrow it down. But my own approach has been to widen the zoom, zoom out, zoom in. And so that makes for kind of like an interesting life, because you're always discovering something wonderful. So to have the wonder of nature, the wonder of music, they come together. And you're always like a child, in a way you have the perception of a child, like everything you're looking for the first time.
Yeah. I first heard you in about 2005, 2006, and right away I was impressed by what you were doing. And as you said, you just have to be in the moment and play, and you play so many different instruments. That's one thing I really loved about your approach, is that you were always in the moment, really listening to other musicians, playing off of what they are doing and picking up different instruments and being in that moment. But even more so, what I appreciated about you is your ability to sit back a little bit and give that space in music when you're trying to let others do their thing. And that's one thing that I think sometimes younger musicians might struggle with. But as you progress in life and you're learning more and more, as you have, obviously, you're able to find those pockets of hold off and let others do what they're doing.
That's one thing about working with students of all levels. That's one thing I've always enjoyed, playing together. Playing music is fine. It's a great thing. I love playing music. I could stay alone and play music all day long. But at the same time, when you play with other people, it can be a group, could be an orchestra, could be a big band, could be a quartet, whatever. You are really you engaging in the not just in the vertical aspect of music, but in the horizontal, broad aspect in which the interactions between a bass player and a drummer and a horn player and a singer, and that to be able to, so your point of hearing, there's a point of view and there's a point of hearing. Your point of hearing, instead of being me, what am I doing? It becomes like sound. What is happening here? And what's missing? Sometimes what's missing is silence. You just say, well, okay, what's missing for me to stop playing and just enjoy what's going on? And here maybe I can do ping, or maybe I can do blah blah blah. It depends. It's really also a process of developing intuition, because most musical decisions, meaning, am I going to play this note or not play this note? Am I going to write this note or not write this note? Those are decisions that have to be made in a fraction of a second. I mean, a tiny little slice of a second. And those things, our thinking process takes way too long. We like to think that thinking is fast. Thinking is actually super slow. In reflex actions, like you put your hand on a hot thing, go, whoa! You don't even think. You just pull your hand out because it's hot. Or somebody, you go in the cactus and prick your finger on the little thorn and go, whoa! You don't hold it there thinking, whoa, why is this hurting? So that's the best place to play music from, is to develop your reflexes, your intuitive reflexes, not just automatic reflexes, because otherwise you'll be playing the same thing over and over, like an automaton, like a robot. But by developing the intuition and the perception, you are able to make musical decisions that are musical, they are like musically coherent, harmonically, melodically speaking, but at the same time, you surprise yourself. Like when we record stuff and you go, wow, did I play that thing? How come it? And sometimes, there's mistakes made, your intuition, sometimes you think it goes one way, it's the other way, but it's not such a bad deal. You made something, and then if you realize it, you can actually fix it before it even becomes a sound. Like you try something, you slide. Like cats, they always find, the cats are amazing for reflex. You can drop, they always fall on their legs because they are amazing reflexes and intuitive. And we like to develop that. Sometimes what happens when people study too much music is that the whole process of music making becomes a cerebral, mental exercise in like logical thought. Like musical theory is great. But at the same time, if you only play with musical from the point of musical theory, you basically, everything is flowing like a book. And everything becomes linear. And then you fall into scales, you fall into modes, you fall into these arpeggios that bam, bam, down, 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 which are all interesting, but it's not really music. Scales are not music. Scales is something that we use to create some logical understanding of the organization of sounds. But the fact that they're presented as lines betrays the fact that music is actually spirals. It's the sound, the waves of air that sound uses to project, to disseminate through air. It's really spirals. If you can look at the speakers and see the sound that comes out, if we could see that, we would understand things would be a lot more like smoke, like. And so, in other words, when we develop this intuitive response, we are surfing those waves of sound, and at that moment, you can always record it, and you go back and analyze it. Say, oh, there, I played this chord, and there was this mode, and that mode, and all those things are useful, but they're not essential. And they have the danger of overstressing the linear aspect. So a lot of people that have this beautiful vision, or vision is a weird word because it's invisible, but they have this perspective of music, which is absolutely shapeless and formless, but it has patterns, has geometric forms, and has forms which are actually very much like the forms of nature, because nature is formed by the same forces that, trees and clouds and rivers and waters. But instead they lose that, and everything starts to become like, it's like if you be an artist and suddenly you cannot make a drawing without using a ruler. So everything has to be like You know, I use a ruler too, but that's mostly to follow Hermeto's writing on the score.
Wow. You have such a good way of explaining things. I could listen to you for hours. It's been great. Going back to your college, putting the professor hat on, I guess, and thinking about everything that you've done over the years at Cornish College of the Arts and the courses that you've designed. There's so much talk about, design, having certain type of classes that is really thinking about the moment, not only the present, but also the future, not only thinking, about the past. What are some classes that you've designed over the years that you were really, I guess I should say, proud of that you've done it, or you had a lot of students really appreciate some of those classes that you've designed and put together?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, I taught at Cornish for 26 years, and it was really good because I came in as a student, and I had the opportunity to study with musicians of the level of like Jim Knapp, great inspiration for me. Jim Knapp really showed me how to take the ideas of music, especially jazz music, and put them into a really nice, well-designed score. I learned a lot from Janice Gitek, composition teacher at Cornish, who was also really very open. She'll say, what do you want to do? Instead of trying to tell us what we should do, she said, what do you want to do? And always very open, and always, I still hold those two people, Jim and Janice, as being great mentors inside of Cornish. And of course, I met the people that, like Chuck Deerdorf, who plays still with me every day, bass player. Chuck auditioned me to as a student at Cornish to come in. And so the classes that I developed over the years, first of all, the ensembles, because having the ability to put people together of different abilities into an ensemble, and somebody plays more, somebody plays less, somebody plays more or less. So to be able to organize, and this is something that we learned from Hermeto, because he took us into his band and at very different levels of musical ability. We didn't all come like from graduates from the same school at the same age with the same experience. We all came with very widely. Some people in our band could not read a note of music, and they could play the super complex arrangements. Others read. Others wrote a lot. Others didn't write anything. Others, so Hermeto was able to embrace all these different levels of skill and put into something that sounded amazing. Everybody was doing 100% of what they could do, but that 100% was very different for each one. So that is something I'm very proud of having worked with ensembles and brought everything from chamber ensembles to big bands to small groups, groups with 4 vocalists or no vocalists or a lot of horns or no horns and no. So this was all something, or just drums. I led some percussion workshops, just the rhythms of Brazil, and understanding that everybody playing some kind of percussion instrument. Also, I worked a lot with singer-songwriters. There was a time there was an ensemble called the Composer-Performer Ensemble, in which I taught for a few years people that came as singer-songwriters, folk, people playing the guitar and trying to develop. And it was an interesting experience because they didn't get to choose instrumentation. Instrumentation is what the people who are there. So it might be a harpist and a flutist and a guitarist, and that's it. Okay, now I have to make music with those people. How can we find the colors and the balance of that? And also some conceptual classes, such as one that I called Beyond Scales and Modes, which is really a way to understand using simple triads as a way to build up starting points for improvisation. But it's actually a fantastic tool because it works. It's like a Swiss Army knife. You can open it up and you can open a bottle of wine, or you can open a blade and peel the orange, or you can use the screwdriver depending which side. So this tool is equally useful for melodicizing, creating melodies over chord changes, like what was called jazz improvisation over changes. But it also works the other way around. You have a melody, you want to harmonize it. You just use the other side of the blade, and now you can use the triads to express a whole bunch of different potential harmonic options. And so it works both ways, and it's fantastic. So these are courses that I'm now teaching on my own website, and teaching in this time that the performances have all been canceled, and the workshops, everything that I was going to do around the world this year, everything's got canceled because of the pandemic. But on the other hand, I'm very grateful for the fact that I was able to start a series of classes online with the support of my amazing family that helped me to organize that and create flyers. And so I'm currently teaching right here where you see me. You know, this is my teaching setup, and I work with a group. I am working with a jazz night school in Seattle, starting a new class at the end of September, exactly about beyond scales and modes, which is something that I started and I continue to develop. I also teach something called the Arboreal Concept, which is using forms derived from nature as templates to develop music. So arboreal means trees. So we use trees as being the template, but it could be clouds or it could be rivers. But in this case, it's trees. I also teach a piano class through a website called Piano Groove, in which I have a camera over the keyboard. So when I play, people can see my hands. I say, okay, here's a voice, and here's the voice, and here's a rhythm, so they can see. So this is going quite well as well. I have students in Australia, you know, all over the world, because people get a subscription to Piano Groove and offer twice a month this workshop. So that's the work these days. I'm composing. I have a commission. I just finished a commission for the Eroica Trio, which is a chamber music trio from New York, piano, cello, violin, with an added flute player, Viviana Guzman from Chile. And so it's going to be a quartet. And I wrote a five movement suite for them, which will be recorded hopefully early next year. But it's done. I just finished that. And so I keep busy. It's a full day here.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm sure some of those things that you've talked about, especially some of your mentors and other things that you've done, could be life-changing moments. But any life-changing moment, this is a standard question I've asked so many of my guests: a personal life-changing moment and a professional life-changing moment.
Well, I have to look very recently. I mean, the arrival of this pandemic wasn't for everybody a life-changing moment, professional and also, you know, personally, because, you know, we had all these plans, you know, I had gigs and I had travel. I was supposed to be doing an artist in residence at the Guildhall School of Music in London. I had workshops in Germany, in Switzerland. I had the whole thing planned. And suddenly it was like, whoa, that's actually not going to happen. So different ways we had to, in a way, reinvent ourselves. And I was very fortunate because I understand how many musicians are having to sell their instruments right now because they don't have gigs, and they have to sell the things that they use to play music so that they can pay their bills and survive. And in my case, I'm actually very fortunate because I had replaced my setup computer in April, which is right at the beginning. So at least I have, for the foreseeable future, the technology support to be able to do and flute. I got a nicer microphone and so cameras and things like this that enable you to do, but still it required that's what I mean. In this kind of, when the whole circumstance changes, what you thought it was going this way, now it's going that way. So the ground has shifted so much. It's like being in an earthquake. So we had to reinvent ourselves to create new, okay, how can I do what I was doing and make everything work, like financially, professionally, artistically? Can I still be who I am creatively, but still be able to pay my rent and buy food at the grocery store? So I feel that being an improvising musician has facilitated that level of turning on a dime. You know, you're going this way, suddenly, whoa, the whole thing shifted. Now the light is changing, and everything is like, you know. So you have this ability to at least navigate that. And even though we all get scared, you know, we have masks, you know, and stuff like this, and go out and wash their hands a lot and try to stay safe in this crazy world. But at the same time, we still go out. We're fortunate to live in a place like Seattle where nature is very close. Like last week, we couldn't leave. The air was so bad. We couldn't go out and breathe. So we went out like quickly, like get into the car, just drive a little bit and just go quickly, go and come back, you know. But now it opened up. So now we can go out and walk again. And so this, for me, I feel myself very fortunate. And I'm in touch also the other thing that had to reinvent is that when we are playing music in person and doing the kind of concerts and the teaching, everything, we're really living in the geographical zone that's the feasibility of that. Okay, we're going to drive 8 hours to go teach somewhere. So now I'm teaching people that are in Australia or they're in Ireland or in Brazil. So having this, so we have in a way transitioned to a world of more not physical presence, but at least the ability to reach using the technology of Zoom and internet and things that we can do, that we're exploring all those things. I have for the first time since January, I'm going to play a live gig this Saturday with a trio. And this is like, I mean, the amount of work to make that work is like, I had to buy tons of cables and tripods and things like this just to connect so we can able to be spaced, socially distant, but at least playing together and rehearse, finding a place to rehearse where we could be wide enough from each other. So this is starting to happen. I have a trio gig this Saturday, then I have a quintet gig next month, part of the Earshot Jazz Festival. With my quintet, we're going to be all in the theater with far apart. I'm not going to play any flute or melodica, no wind. It's going to be all with a mask, just piano. But this is already a way for us to find solutions so we don't give up what we do, so we don't stop doing what we do. And at the same time, there's such a hunger for playing. And we understand that we're not doctors or grocery delivery people who are really essential. But what we provide as musicians is also essential, because I challenge anybody who's listening to this to try to imagine one day, 24 hours, without music. It doesn't exist. You can't. It's like try to imagine one day without breathing. Try to imagine one day without water or food. So music is that kind of essential thing that you need to, as what do you call, a sensation, an experience that involves primarily an invisible medium, like air is also invisible. So music comes in invisibly, and then it does a very important role in making people stay a little bit sane and balanced in a world that tries everything to throw you off that balance, you know? So I feel that what we provide as we musicians is an essential work that doesn't get valued, doesn't get, given the importance that it has, but still we got to do it because we don't have anything else to do. And we know that if we don't do that, we don't feel good, we don't feel healthy. So the ability to provide that for other people, sometimes for free, sometimes paid. We provide it anyway. I do a lot of live streaming things. I just sit at the piano and then play for half an hour. And that's fun. Anybody can watch. And there's some other things. People buy a ticket to support the process of making that be possible. Imagine all the people who work in the technical, jobs, sound persons and lighting designers and theater people that have all this. Suddenly their job is gone and they don't even know when it will be back. Who knows?
Yeah. We talked so much about music. Is there anything that you do that your colleagues, your friends don't know about? It's a hidden passion that you have that you're willing to share, or any passion really?
Well, I have many. I love cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Cooking for me is just like making music. You can follow the score, you can improvise, even though it's something that it can be like sketched out. Okay, I love like following a certain chef that has recipes like Yotam Motolenghi or Nigella Lawson or several other people that I follow up and that sounds like a really good recipe. But then we also improvise. Sometimes, there's no recipe. You open the cupboard, it says, there's a tin of that and there's a bag of that. How can I put this together and create? So the ability to mix and match. And ultimately what happens with food is just an experience. It's not something you put up on a frame on the wall. It's like music. In a way, it's an ephemeral experience. You eat, you have that, that was so good. You remember when you eat, it says, I'd like to eat this another time. But you don't want to eat that every day. You'd be bored if you had to eat the same whatever dish every day to the same day, twice a day. So at one point, it gives you this cloud of experience. So that's one thing I love. The other thing I love to do is to go out in nature, to hike, to walk among the trees, to climb. We go up mountains, and we live again in a region that offers us that. We can leave Seattle within 1 hour of driving. We are really up in the woods, in the mountains. And even though I come from Brazil, I'm from Rio de Janeiro, and I love hiking there too. So whenever I go there, I also find my secret spots on top of the hills and the beaches that are still wild, and there's no roads there. Going to places where it's like finding your special sacred places in the world. I like that. So cooking, gardening, something else that for me, is being a biologist again. I plant my tomatoes every year and plant my veggies. I love to just walk down to the garden and cut some herbs from the garden and put them in the food fresh. That for me gives me big pleasure to just go and chop some sage, rosemary, parsley, mint, whatever we have. I have a lot of herbs growing in the garden, not just in our garden. We live in an apartment complex, so we plant a lot of places, and we pick up herbs from other people too, and we give them. So there's also a community thing being part of that. So those biking, something else I love. Get on the bike and just bike. I live close to the 520 bridge, so dude, fantastic. Biking at night, biking in the rain. I love those things. I think it's like something that I've done for years, so it's a pleasure.
Yeah. A couple more questions. One is an artist that's no longer alive that you would have loved to collaborate with, or at least play with a little bit, or have some kind of a musical collaboration with, and also someone who's living and you haven't worked with them. You've worked with so many artists around the world, but someone you haven't worked with that you would love to collaborate with now.
Oh, that's good questions. As far as an artist that's no longer alive, I don't know. When I hear Roland Kirk, Russell Roland Kirk, I find this energy so intense and so beautiful. I wish I would have the opportunity to play with him, because every time, and I remember first time I came to the United States was 1973, and I was somewhere near in Michigan, and somebody turned on the TV, and there was him playing, and he was completely. I remember I was not even a jazz player. I was more into rock and roll, but I saw that thing, and I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. How, not just because he played several horns at once, but the energy of the music was something that attracted me a lot. So that would be an artist that I'd love to have worked. As far as living artists, every time I see new people, I'm always, curious about what's happening. I always hear, new voices, new instrumentalists. I love Jacob Collier. I think he's a brilliant musician, and it would be fun to play. A couple of years ago, there was a Brazilian pianist, a young Brazilian pianist called André Memari. He's a great composer. He's kind of like a guy like us. He writes for orchestras, he improvises. He's a fantastic pianist. He plays a lot of different instruments. And he also is a fantastic recording engineer. He has his own studio, his home. So I looked at André. I was a guy with a little bit of jealousy. Oh my God, that's so young guy, full of energy playing. So I said, why don't we do something together, since I want so much to be. So, and I approached him about making a record together, and it turns out that he grew up listening to the music that I was making with Hermeto. So in a way, he was also saying, what a great surprise, because I wish we could do something together. Because even though we never played together, I grew up listening to you play. So we made a record in 2 days, 2 pianos. We created the whole thing, put 2 grand pianos, he'd set up all the microphones. We made a beautiful record that's actually not many people have heard yet. Probably will be years from now when people actually realize that. And we were like, the playing was so intuitive and fluid that I still, when I listen, I don't know which piano is him, which piano is me. We are like completely like meshed together in the creation of the music, and go one direction, go another. We ended up starting one song, ended up in another song that we didn't talk about, and then we're there again, and then so this is the kind of thing that is very. So that was a great experience, and I'm sure that I mentioned Jacob Collier. It would be something like that. The experience of like finding what's missing, complementing, having fun, having the joy, because so many times music, especially when it's the same instrument, it it becomes some kind of a competition. Oh, who plays more? Who plays faster? Who plays wider? Who plays louder? You know, and this kind of thing in music is absolutely makes no sense. Nobody's counting points. We're not trying to get like to a champion that's going to take the trophy home. That doesn't work in music. I think that somebody once described it this way, and I love the idea, which is like says in music, when you have a group of people playing, you're kind of like in a restaurant in which everybody is a waiter.
Yeah.
So your job is to serve other people. So how can I make you sound good? Can I do anything to make you sound good? I will. And if that person does that to you, then the result is like the perfect partnership, you know, because everybody's like serving the other. So instead of one person being served, they're like sitting on the table, and the other one is like bringing all the dishes. No, at one point, the person who's eating gets up and serves the person who serves him. So that idea of the restaurant with all waiters and all cooks too, because everybody's also a cook and a waiter at the same time. So I like to hold that as a model, an image to enter into any kind of collaboration.
Wow. Last question. This is another one that's kind of a standard in my over 130 episodes. Advice to young musicians having the experience that you've had so many years. And I'm sure many of the musicians listening to this will have lots to take away from everything you're saying, but some advice that you haven't mentioned yet, advice to young musicians.
That's a good one. I think that it doesn't matter how many years of experience you have as a musician. So this is advice is not just for young musicians, it's to all musicians. The best situation to learn anything, but in music, it's what we're talking about, is that you create the opportunity to play with somebody who plays for longer, has been playing music for longer than you have. In other words, somebody with more experience than you have. And at the same time, you have the experience to collaborate with somebody who has a lot less experience than you have. So if you can situate yourself in that continuum in which there's somebody who's like pouring the water down to you, and you take the water and you pour it down to somebody else, that is the only way that you evolve in music. And that's one of those sayings that I think people really should pay attention to, is like you will never advance to an upper step on the stairs, on the ladder or whatever, on the career, unless you help somebody else to the step where you are. And then somebody else is going to help it to the step where they are. So it's kind of like a chain. It's like a river, but it's a river running up instead of running down the hill. So it's a chain in which you support and help younger musicians, and you bring them up. And if there's somebody, you know, because sometimes in music, that's the thing that you don't find in science or anything else. Sometimes a 10-year-old is going to teach you something that the 80-year-old did not teach you. So you have to learn from both sides. You have to learn sometimes from people that have a completely from left field. They come with an experience that it's not yours, and they still show you something and you go, wow, really? You cannot always assume that because you have more experience, you know more than that person. That person can know more than you. And the same thing, you could also teach something to somebody who's an older musician than you are, as long as you are, like your hands are connected, right? It's a chain. You have one hand up and one hand down. So if you're part of that, music is just the electricity that's going through that wire. Wow. If you break that connection because it becomes all about you becomes individualistic, then you just, that energy eventually gets stagnant and you're going to get so full of yourself, you can explode. But if you have that connection of joining hands on both sides, both on the side of more experience and the side of less experience, and that's why I like to teach as much as I like to play and collaborate. I think that if any of those activities would be missing, something very fundamental and precious would be missing.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's been great catching up, and I always enjoy your performances, and I'll have a link to your website underneath so people could check it out. Anything else you want to add before we end?
Well, first of all, great appreciation. Thank you. Great for inviting me, and great questions. You're a great interviewer. I appreciate that. And being a great musician yourself too. So, but the fact that you can listen, you know how to listen very well. So this is something I'm very pleased and very happy to be doing this with you here.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
You too, man. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.